From the observation deck of the Galactic Council vessel Starweaver, Ambassador Vex Kali watched the third planet of the Sol system with growing unease. Her 4 purple eyes blinked in sequence, a nervous habit she'd developed during her 3 centuries of diplomatic service. The humans called it Earth, though most civilized species referred to it as that troublesome dirt ball in official reports. Ambassador, her aide Zim-Tor chirped, his feathered crest twitching with excitement. The sensors are detecting another anomaly. Vex Kali's mandibles clicked in annoyance. Let me guess. The humans are doing something impossibly stupid that will somehow work out in their favor? Actually, yes, how did you? Lucky guess. She sighed, a sound like steam escaping from an overheated reactor. What is it this time? Did they accidentally cure another galactic plague while trying to make better pizza? Or perhaps they've discovered faster than light travel while attempting to fix their primitive automobiles. Zim-Tor consulted his data pad, his 3-fingered hands dancing across the holographic interface. Neither, Ambassador. It appears a human named Marcus Finn has discovered something buried in what they call his backyard. Oh, wonderful. Let me paint you a picture of how this ends, Zim-Tor. Vex Kali turned away from the viewport, her sleek blue form moving with practiced grace. This Marcus Finn will touch something he shouldn't touch, activate something that's been dormant for millennia, and somehow become the most dangerous being in the known galaxy. All because he was probably trying to plant flowers or some other mundane human activity. Zim-Tor's beak opened in surprise. How could you possibly know that? Because I've been studying these ridiculous creatures for longer than your species has had space flight. She gestured toward the planet below. They have a talent for stumbling into universe-altering situations while doing the most ordinary things. Remember the chocolate incident of 2387? The one where Dr. Jennifer Walsh accidentally created a new form of sustainable energy while trying to improve her grandmother's brownie recipe. Exactly. Or the great shoelace discovery, when that mechanic Tom Bradley figured out how to fold space-time because he was frustrated with untying knots every morning. Zim-Tor fluttered his wings nervously. Should we intervene? Vex Kali laughed, a sound like wind chimes in a thunderstorm. Intervene? My dear aide, the last time we tried to help humanity, they accidentally conquered half the Andromeda galaxy while trying to return a borrowed library book. The communication console buzzed with an incoming priority signal. Zim-Tor activated it, and the weathered face of Captain Rex Morrison appeared on the holographic display. The human looked tired, which wasn't unusual. What was unusual was the expression of barely contained panic in his eyes. Ambassador Vex Kali, Captain Morrison began, his voice tight with tension. We need to talk. Now. Let me guess, Captain. Marcus Finn found something interesting in his garden. Morrison's face went pale. How did you? Never mind. I should know better by now. Yes, he found something. It's a sword. An old sword. A very, very old sword. And let me further guess, he touched it. Of course he touched it. He's human. They touch everything. Morrison ran a hand through his graying hair. The inscription on the blade appeared the moment his skin made contact. It reads, "All enemies of the fallen warrior are now your enemies." Vex Kali felt her blood chill, which was impressive considering her species was naturally cold-blooded. Captain Morrison, please tell me you're joking. Please tell me this is some elaborate human prank involving theatrical props and creative writing. I wish I could, Ambassador, but the archaeological team confirms it. The sword is Kethvar origin. The ambassador's 4 eyes widened simultaneously, a sight that would have been comical if the situation weren't so dire. The Kethvar, the warrior race that conquered 60% of the galaxy before mysteriously disappearing 5,000 years ago. Those Kethvar? The very ones, and according to our linguistic experts, the inscription isn't just decorative. It's a binding contract, a blood oath, a de pa. A monumentally problematic magical legal document that just made one random human the inheritor of the most impressive list of enemies in galactic history. Vex Kali finished. Magnificent. Truly magnificent. Zim-Tor looked confused. I don't understand. If the Keth Var disappeared 5,000 years ago, who cares about their ancient enemies? Vex Kali and Captain Morrison exchanged a look that spoke volumes about the naive optimism of youth. Zim-Tor, my innocent little aide, the Keth Var didn't just have enemies. They collected enemies the way humans collect. What do they collect? Regrets and coffee mugs, Captain Morrison supplied helpfully. Exactly. The Keth Var managed to anger every major power in the galaxy. The Zephyrian Empire, the collective consciousness of Thal, the machine lords of Quantum 7, the telepathic monks of... We get it, Ambassador Morrison interrupted. The point is, most of those civilizations still exist, and most of them hold grudges like humans hold onto old movies they'll never watch again. Which is to say, indefinitely and for no logical reason, Vex Kali added. Captain, where is Marcus Finn now? That's part of the problem. Morrison's expression grew even more strained. He's missing. Along with the sword. His neighbor, Mrs. Eleanor Blackstone, says she saw him walking into the woods behind his house about 6 hours ago. He was carrying the sword and muttering something about feeling different. Vex Kali closed her 4 eyes and counted to 10 in 7 different languages. Of course he's missing. Of course he took the sword. And of course he's feeling different. The blade has probably awakened dormant genetic markers in his DNA. Genetic markers. The Keth Var were master geneticists, Captain. They didn't just make weapons, they made weapons that made warriors. That sword isn't just accepting Marcus Finn as the new owner of its grudge list. It's turning him into something capable of handling that responsibility. Zim-Tor's feathers ruffled with excitement. So he's becoming stronger? More dangerous? Zim-Tor, when you use words like stronger and more dangerous in reference to a human who has just inherited the combat legacy of the most feared warrior race in galactic history, you're not describing an improvement. You're describing an extinction-level event with opposable thumbs and poor impulse control. The communication console erupted with new signals, dozens of them, all marked with the highest priority codes. Morrison's face disappeared, replaced by a parade of alien officials, military commanders, and what appeared to be several very concerned insurance representatives. Ambassador Vex Kali, squawked General Tox Vim of the Zephyrian fleet, his scaled face twisted with barely controlled rage. Our deep space sensors have detected the reactivation of a Keth Var soul blade. We demand immediate surrender of the weapon and the primitive who dares to wield it. Before Vex Kali could respond, another signal pushed through, this one from the massive form of war leader Blex Khan, representing the Machine Lords. His mechanical voice buzzed with electronic fury. The organic who has claimed the blade of Keth Tool the Destroyer must face judgment. We have suffered too long under the weight of ancient shame. Gentlemen, please, Vex Kali began, but she was immediately drowned out by a chorus of additional voices. The telepathic monks were sending mental demands that made her headache worse than usual. The collective consciousness was speaking in its creepy unified voice about settling old scores. Even the normally peaceful tree shepherds of Gaia Prime were making vaguely threatening statements about pruning aggressive branches. It was like watching the galaxy's most dangerous beings suddenly remember they all had the same ex-boyfriend who owed them money. This is fascinating, Zim-Tor whispered. How many enemies did this Keth Tool person actually make? According to the historical records, Vex Kali said, pulling up files on her personal display. Keth Tool the Destroyer spent approximately 40 years of his life systematically humiliating every major military power in the known galaxy. He defeated the Zephyrian Grand Armada single-handedly during what they still call the Day of Infinite Shame. He outcalculated the Machine Lords in a strategic competition that lasted 3 years and ended with them questioning their own programming. He convinced the collective consciousness to doubt itself so thoroughly that they spent 2 decades in therapy. And now some random human has inherited all of that. Not just inherited it, Zim-Tor. If my understanding of Keth-Var blood magic is correct, Marcus Finn isn't just responsible for Keth-Tool's enemies, he's becoming Keth-Tool. The sword doesn't just carry a grudge list. It carries the accumulated combat experience, tactical knowledge, and unfortunately for everyone involved, the personality traits of its previous owner. Captain Morrison's voice crackled through the chaos of alien demands. Ambassador, we're getting reports from the search teams. They found something. Do tell, Captain. I'm sure it's perfectly reasonable and not at all terrifying. They found a clearing in the woods where every tree in a 100-meter radius has been cut down. In cuts, surgical precision, and in the center of the clearing, someone, presumably Finn, has built what appears to be a training ground, complete with practice dummies, obstacle courses, and what our engineers think might be a primitive but effective weapons forge. Vex Kali stared at the communication display for a long moment. Captain Morrison, how long did you say Marcus Finn has been missing? 6 hours. 6 hours. In 6 hours, a regular human accountant has cleared a forest, constructed advanced training facilities, and apparently learned enough about metallurgy to build a forge. Does that seem normal to you? Nothing about this seems normal, Ambassador, but it gets worse. Of course it does. The practice dummies, they're not made of wood or metal. According to our scans, they're made of materials that match the armor signatures of every major galactic military force. Somehow, Marcus Finn has created perfect replicas of Zephyrian battlesuits Machine Lord chassis, collective neural nodes, and about 24 other types of advanced combat equipment. Using what resources? That's just it, we have no idea. There are no supply shipments, no manufacturing equipment, nothing. It's as if he just knew how to make them. Like the knowledge was already in his head, waiting to be activated. Zim-Tor was practically vibrating with excitement. This is incredible. A human is single-handedly becoming the most prepared warrior in galactic history. Zim-Tor, you sweet, naive creature. Vex Kali said, patting his feathered head with one of her forearms, let me explain why this is not incredible. This is the opposite of incredible. This is the kind of situation that makes entire civilizations suddenly remember they have urgent business in other galaxies. The view screen flickered, and suddenly the image changed to show the forest clearing Captain Morrison had described. The sight made Vex Kali's respiratory system skip several beats. The clearing was exactly as described, but the human figure moving through it defied all logic. Marcus Finn, if it was still Marcus Finn, moved with the fluid grace of someone who had spent lifetimes perfecting the art of combat. He was tall, lean, and carried himself with the confident bearing of someone who had never encountered a problem that couldn't be solved with the appropriate application of sharp metal. The sword hung at his side, its ancient blade seeming to pulse with inner light. Even through the long-distance sensors, Vex Kali could see that the weapon was no longer the tarnished relic it had been when first discovered. It gleamed with the unmistakable sheen of a blade that had been properly awakened, properly bonded, and was very much looking forward to being properly used. Captain Morrison, Vex Kali said slowly, I need you to be very honest with me. How many search teams did you send to investigate this clearing? 3 teams, standard reconnaissance protocol. And how many came back? There was a pause that lasted about 3 seconds too long. All of them came back, Ambassador. But that's not what I asked. I asked how many came back, not whether they came back. They all came back, but they came back different. quieter, more respectful, and when we asked them what they saw, they just kept saying the same thing. Which was, "He's ready for them." Vex Kali closed all four eyes and made a decision that would either save the galaxy or get her fired from the most prestigious diplomatic position in known space. Probably both. "Captain Morrison, I want you to establish a communication link with Marcus Finn. To direct contact, and I want you to tell him that Ambassador Vex Kali of the Galactic Council requests an immediate audience." "Are you sure that's wise, Ambassador?" "Captain, at this moment, approximately half the military powers in the galaxy are mobilizing their fleets to come here and to settle 5,000-year-old grudges with a man who was an accountant this morning. The other half are probably updating their insurance policies and making plans to relocate to different dimensions. Wisdom went out the airlock the moment that Sword decided to make Earth its new home." Zimtor looked up from his data pad with worry. "Ambassador, the fleet positions are updating in real time. It looks like we're about to have some very angry visitors." On the display, Marcus Finn stopped his training routine and looked directly up at the sky. For a moment that seemed to stretch across eternity, his eyes met the camera. When he smiled, it was the smile of someone who had been waiting his entire life for exactly this moment. He raised the sword in what was unmistakably a salute, and his voice carried clearly across the communication channel. "Tell them I'll be ready." 12 hours later, the space around Earth looked like the galaxy's most expensive parking lot had collided with a military parade. Vex Kali counted at least 47 different fleet configurations, each representing a civilization that had apparently been nursing a grudge against Keth Tool the Destroyer for 5 millennia. "This is magnificent," she muttered, watching her diplomatic career evaporate in real time. "Simply magnificent." The largest vessel belonged to the Zephyrian Empire, a massive dreadnought called Eternal Vengeance that looked like someone had weaponized a small moon and given it anger management issues. Flanking it were the geometric nightmare ships of the Machine Lords, their hulls bristling with enough firepower to sterilize a solar system before lunch. "Ambassador," Zimtor chirped nervously, incoming transmission from the surface. "It's Marcus Finn." The main display shifted to show the human standing in his forest clearing. The transformation was even more dramatic now. Gone was any trace of the mild-mannered accountant who had been digging in his garden yesterday. In his place stood someone who looked like he had been born to hold that ancient blade. His hair had grown longer, touched with silver streaks that definitely hadn't been there 12 hours ago. His eyes held depths that spoke of memories far older than his 28 years. Most unsettling of all, he looked completely relaxed, like a man who had just figured out the solution to a puzzle that had been bothering him his entire life. "Ambassador Vex Kali," Marcus said, his voice carrying a confidence that made seasoned diplomats everywhere break out in nervous sweats. "I understand we have visitors." "Mr. Finn," Vex Kali replied carefully, "we have approximately 24 of the most dangerous military forces in galactic history parked in your orbit. They're all here because they have unfinished business with the previous owner of your sword. Perhaps we could discuss a peaceful resolution." Marcus laughed, and the sound carried harmonics that spoke of ancient battlefields and hard-won victories. "Ambassador, with respect, I don't think they're here to talk." As if summoned by his words, General Tox Vim's voice boomed across all communication frequencies. "Human, you carry the blade of our greatest shame. Surrender now, and your death will be swift." "That's generous of him," Marcus observed dryly. "What about the others?" War Leader Blex Khan's mechanical voice joined the chorus. "The one who claims Keth Tool's legacy must face the trial of steel. We have waited 5,000 years to prove our superiority." The collective demands satisfaction came the unified voice of the Thal consciousness. "The humiliation of our forebears burns in our shared memory." Similar declarations poured in from the assembled fleets. The tree shepherds wanted to prune this aggressive branch. The Quantum Lords were insisting on correcting this temporal anomaly. Even the usually peaceful Harmony Coalition was making vague threats about restoring cosmic balance. Marcus listened to it all with the patience of someone who had heard similar speeches many times before. When the declarations finally ended, he nodded thoughtfully. "So, let me understand this correctly," he said. "You've all traveled across the galaxy to avenge defeats that happened before my species invented writing. These defeats inflicted by someone who died 5,000 years ago. And your brilliant plan is to attack a single human on his home planet. The blade makes you Keth-Tul's inheritor," General Tox Vim snarled. "You bear his sins." "His sins?" Marcus raised an eyebrow. "From what I've been learning, and have I been learning Keth-Tul never started a single war. He just finished the ones you all brought to him." Vex Kali felt her headache intensify. "Mr. Finn, perhaps we should focus on de-escalation rather than historical accuracy." "Oh, but Ambassador, historical accuracy is exactly what we need right now." Marcus began walking through his training ground, the sword's light casting strange shadows. "See, the wonderful thing about inheriting someone's memories is that you get the whole story, not just the propaganda version." He stopped next to one of his practice dummies, the one shaped like Zephyrian battle armor. "General Tox Vim, your people called Keth-Tul the Destroyer, but you never mention why he earned that title. Should I tell them, or would you prefer to?" The silence from the Zephyrian flagship was deafening. "I'll take that as a no." Marcus's smile was sharp enough to cut steel. The Zephyrian Empire spent 3 years systematically conquering and enslaving every peaceful colony in the Outer Rim. When they finally reached Keth-Tul's homeworld, they demanded absolute surrender and tribute in the form of half their population. He touched the practice dummy, and somehow Vex Kali could feel the weight of history pressing down on the conversation. Keth-Tul offered them single combat instead, one warrior against their entire invasion fleet. The Zephyrians laughed and sent their Grand Armada to teach this primitive a lesson about the futility of resistance. Marcus moved to the next dummy, this one matching Machine Lord specifications. "War Leader Blex Khan, your people's story is even more interesting." The Machine Lords decided that organic life was inefficient and needed to be optimized. They gave every biological species in the galaxy a choice: submit to conversion or face extinction. That is not." Blex Khan's voice glitched with what might have been embarrassment. "Oh, but it is. Keth-Tul was the only one who chose option 3, proved that your calculations were wrong. It took him 3 years of strategic brilliance to demonstrate that organic creativity could outthink artificial logic by the time he was finished. Your own systems were questioning whether you were truly superior or just very good at following programming." Zim Tor was frantically taking notes. "This is incredible historical revision." "It's not revision, Zim Tor," Vex Kali said quietly. "It's the other side of the story, the side that got buried under 5,000 years of wounded pride." Marcus continued his tour of the practice dummies, each one representing a different civilization's forgotten shame. The collective consciousness had tried to forcibly merge every independent mind in the galaxy into their groupthink. The tree shepherds had attempted to transform all worlds into forest preserves, regardless of existing inhabitants. The Quantum Lords had been playing God with timelines, erasing entire species from history when their existence became inconvenient. In every case, Keth-Tul had been the lone voice saying no and backing up that refusal with skill that bordered on the supernatural. "So you see," Marcus concluded, "you're not here to avenge ancient defeats. You're here because one warrior proved that your empires were built on lies, and you've spent 5 millennia trying to convince yourselves that he was the villain." The assembled fleets hung in space like question marks made of metal and ballast. "This changes nothing," General Tox Vim finally growled. "You still carry his blade, you still inherit his debts." "You're absolutely right," Marcus agreed cheerfully. I do inherit his debts. All of them. Including the debt he owed to every innocent life your wars destroyed. He raised the sword, and for the first time its true power became visible. Light poured from the blade, not the harsh glare of weapons, but the warm radiance of stars being born. Around the forest clearing, the air itself began to shimmer. "Ambassador Vex Kali," Marcus said, his voice carrying across space with impossible clarity, "I want you to pay attention to what happens next. This is important." Mr. Finn, Vex Kali began, but he was already moving. The first ship to attack was a Zephyrian destroyer, its captain apparently deciding that talking was overrated. Lance beams capable of melting through starship hulls lanced down toward the forest clearing. They never arrived. Instead, they struck something invisible about a kilometer above Marcus's head and dissipated like morning mist. The human hadn't moved, hadn't raised a shield, hadn't done anything except stand there with quiet confidence. "Fascinating," war leader Blex Khan observed. "He appears to have generated a defensive field using principles our sensors cannot detect." "That's not a defensive field," Vex Kali whispered, her four eyes wide with recognition. "That's a Kethvar honor guard." "A what now?" Zim Tor asked. "The Kethvar didn't just make individual warriors, Zim Tor. They made a warrior caste that transcended death itself. Every Kethvar who died in defense of innocence became part of an eternal guard, bound to protect their successors." On the surface, Marcus smiled. "Gentlemen, I'd like you to meet some old friends." The air around the clearing shimmered, and suddenly the forest was full of translucent figures. Tall, proud, and unmistakably Kethvar, they stood in perfect formation around their newest member. At their head stood a figure that could only be Keth Tul himself, ancient, scarred, and radiating the kind of presence that made entire fleets reconsider their life choices. "Hello, old enemies," Keth Tul's spirit said, his voice carrying the weight of millennia. "Did you miss us?" What followed could charitably be called a battle. More accurately, it was a masterclass in why picking fights with legendary warriors tends to end poorly. The Zephyrian Grand Fleet discovered that their weapon systems had mysteriously developed the ability to shoot backwards. The Machine Lords found their logic circuits rewriting themselves into poetry, bad poetry that rhymed efficiency with idiocy. The collective consciousness experienced its first case of multiple personality disorder, with each personality insisting it was the real one. Meanwhile, Marcus and the honor guard stood in their forest clearing, not attacking, not advancing, simply demonstrating that some forces in the universe are too fundamental to defeat. "This is impossible," General Toxvim transmitted, his voice cracking with desperation. "We have superior numbers, superior firepower, superior technology." "You have superior everything," Marcus agreed, "except the one thing that actually matters." "Which is?" "You're fighting for your pride. I'm fighting for everyone you'd hurt to protect it." One by one, the assembled fleets began to withdraw. Some retreated with dignity, others fled in panic, and a few simply vanished into hyperspace so quickly they left their communications equipment behind. Within an hour, Earth's orbital space was clear except for the Galactic Council vessel. "Well," Vex Kali said after a long silence, "that was educational." Marcus looked up at the stars, the ancient sword still glowing softly at his side. The spirits of the honor guard were fading now, their duty fulfilled, but Vex Kali could see that their strength remained with him. "Ambassador," he said, "I think we need to talk about the future, about what happens when empires built on conquest meet guardians built on protection." "Mr. Finn," she replied, "I have a feeling that conversation is going to change everything." "That's the idea." As the Starweaver prepared to descend to the surface, Zim Tor looked up from his notes with wonder. "Ambassador, do you think this is how legends begin?" Vex Callie watched Marcus Finn walk back toward his house where his neighbor Mrs. Blackstone was probably waiting with questions about all the noise and smiled. Zimtor, I think this is how empires learn to behave. And in the distance, barely audible over the hum of descending spacecraft, came the sound of Marcus Finn asking his neighbor if she'd like some coffee while they discussed the day's events. Some legends, Vex Callie reflected, were more human than others.